Hi, everyone. I'm Jessica, and welcome to my kitchen. It has been so long since I've gone live on YouTube, but for the past few months, probably since July, I've been going live every week on a new streaming platform for food lovers called Kitsch. And along with me and other food creators and chefs, there's just all types of food content being shared all the time. But I've been doing live cooking demos every week, like I said, since July. And going live has really inspired me to revisit my YouTube channel and see what else I could share with people about my love for vegan cooking and eating and plant based food and all the delicious flavors and textures that you can enjoy when you enjoy eating this way. So I thought that it was only appropriate to come back to YouTube with a video that talks about the foundations for me, which is flavor, and talking about my seasoning essentials for flavorful vegan cooking. So, if you're new here, hey, thanks for tuning in. If you are returning, you subscribed to me a while ago, or maybe you saw some of my shorts and you subscribed to my channel. Hello, nice to see you. And if you happen to be watching this live, I don't know if anyone is, please feel free to drop into the chat and say hi. Let me know where you're watching from and give your feedback out through all this throughout this entire process. So I have a lot of seasonings to share. They're sitting to the side here. So let's get into it. I'm going to break it up into a couple different rounds, but yeah, let's get started and talk about what are my seasoning essentials for flavorful vegan cooking. So bring up the first round right now. All right, let's see. Okay, here we go. All right, so this is my first lineup of seasoning essentials, and let's talk about what's on this table. So, a lot of vegan cooking is obviously eating plants, vegetables, legumes, nuts, seeds, beans, all those things. And while many of them taste amazing fresh, sometimes you're craving something, especially if you grew up eating animal products like I did. There might be certain flavors that you're craving and textures as well. So there are ways to achieve certain textures through your cooking technique, but the way to developing flavor is through the combination of seasonings and spices that you use. And so these are some of my favorites for developing really hearty, savory flavors in your plant-based cooking to start. So on this end, we've got our sauces. We have tamari sauce, which is a soy-based sauce. It is salty and savory. And then we also have some liquid aminos, which are made from basically soy protein. And so these are both, in the soy sauce family. I personally am gluten free, so I like to use the tamari because it is gluten free. And then once again, the soy aminos are also gluten free. So I tend to lean towards these as opposed to soy sauce. But if you can eat soy sauce, you don't have any problems with wheat or gluten, go for it because it's usually a lot cheaper. um, and then if you don't deal with soy and you want to add some more savory flavors to your cooking through a sauce, you can look at using coconut aminos. So coconut aminos are great. They also belong in this family, but there is a distinct flavor difference in that coconut aminos are slightly sweeter and less salty. So usually if I'm using coconut aminos in a recipe that calls for liquid aminos or tamari or soy sauce, I will always adjust it by adding just a little bit of sea salt just to supplement and add that extra salt back into the recipe. But these are great for cooking with tofu and mushrooms, basically anything you can think of, but especially if I'm making something like lentil crumbles, right? Or maybe like tofu burgers, black bean burgers, something like that, where it has a hearty texture and I want it to have almost like a beefy type of flavor. This is one of the ingredients that I'm going to include because it really has some nice depth. And I would say that the liquid aminos have even more of a stronger meaty flavor because they're made from soy protein as opposed to, like the tamari, which is made from the whole soybean. This really focuses on extracting that seasoning from the protein. So you get those hearty umami flavors that are associated with protein, right? So these are classics for anybody who is first starting to cook plant-based and they want those hearty, savory flavors. You need to have your soy sauces, your tamaris, your liquid aminos or your coconut aminos on deck. These are definitely essentials. Now, sometimes when you're developing flavor, meaty flavors in plant-based foods, what you're searching for, I refer to it as like a roundness in flavor. So sometimes if you're just adding something, it might just be salty or just might be savory, but you need something to like round out the flavors. So this is where these two ingredients come in. Obviously, people are used to using mustard on hamburger, sausages, things like that. People are used to eating barbecue sauce on like grilled chicken or anything, barbecue tofu, all those things. So it is a great topping sauce, but it also works really well when you're adding it into like marinades or seasoning flavors, like maybe only 2 tablespoons of it. It really adds that roundness because there's that little bit of tang to it. There's a little bit of sweetness. There's some earthiness. This can be used in smaller portions in those recipes when you're trying to build depth of flavor to round out your flavors. And it makes sense because if you look at the ingredients list on this, there's things like distilled vinegar, tomato paste, pineapple juice, smoke flavors, things like that, tamarind, garlic, molasses. So all of those things are very savory and aromatic, but they're already balanced out. And so then when you want to make a marinade, and you want to, like I said, round out those flavors, something like barbecue sauce comes into play really easily, or same with your mustard, specifically whole grain mustard or brown spicy mustard. They just, like I said, have a little bit of tang and earthiness that rounds out the flavors. I don't know, you know what I'm talking about when you taste it, right? I feel like you're with me. Okay, so then another important flavor when I'm developing savory, meaty flavors in plant-based dishes is smokiness. Okay, and so there are things like liquid smoke that you could add, which is just straight up smoke flavor. But my favorites to add smokiness to dishes are Chipotle peppers, which are essentially smoked jalapeno peppers. These are in adobo sauce, but they also have dried Chipotle peppers. So that adds really nice, hearty, smoky flavor. It gives it that cooked outdoors flavor. And then smoked paprika. Okay, smoked paprika all the way. Like I said, I feel like it's right there in the name. Smokiness is one of those other round flavors that just kind of complements savory, aromatic, earthy, tangy, sweet, right? It's just another level of depth of flavor. So, as many levels of flavor that you can add usually, it's really going to round out the flavor, but it's also going to like ignite all the different areas of your tongue, and it's going to make your mouth really interested as you're eating, which is going to lead you to be more satisfied when you complete your meal because it's not so one note, right? Sometimes a clean meal is where it's at, but oftentimes when you really go for bold, layered flavor, that's where the satisfaction comes from. I've heard so many people talk about how they've gone vegan or plant-based and they eat and they just feel hungry all the time or unsatisfied by the food. And part of that is maybe they're not eating enough food because plant-based foods are much more nutrient dense, but they're much more calorie dispersed, right? So processed foods and animal-based foods are much more calorie dense, right? And they're more nutrient deficient. And so the volume of those foods may leave you hungrier. And so you might need to eat more food if you're eating plants more. But part of the dissatisfaction also might be just the cleanness of the flavor, right? It only hits maybe 1 or 2 points on the tongue. And when you really ignite all your taste buds, you're going to get really deep and satisfying flavor as well. And then the final thing in this roundup, it actually kind of relates to our soy sauce and our liquid aminos here, but that's miso paste. So miso paste is basically fermented soybean paste. And honestly, the first time I had miso soup at a Japanese restaurant, I was an adult, so I was not familiar with it, but I thought there was ham in the soup. I thought it was made with some sort of pork broth. That's how savory this stuff is. So obviously you can make soup with it, but it's great to add into your flavor pastes, your marinades, your things you're doing. If you're going to marinate some tofu or some cauliflower or some mushrooms or make your own seitan at home, adding in a bit of miso paste is really going to take it over the top in terms of really just, I don't know, like anchoring the flavor with that hearty flavor, right? And so I have white miso. This one is made with soybeans, but if you don't eat soy, there are options out there for you as well. And so this is a organic chickpea miso. So this one is made with chickpeas, so it's soy-free and gluten-free. And then this is just your classic white soybean miso. They also have red miso. So depending on what you're trying to make, what your flavor preferences are, you're going to be able to find a miso that works for you. So these are my key savory flavor enhancers for plant-based cooking. So we're going to clear this table and then I'm going to get into the next round. All right, I got some space over here. So let's move these out of the way. Now, as I clear this, I just want to make a disclaimer that things that you aren't going to see from me in this video are basically just seasoning kitchen essentials like garlic powder, onion powder, ginger powder. I can go over just seasoning essentials for just good cooking, period. But I wanted to pick flavors and seasonings that were really specific for me in my cooking journey to develop really good flavors in plant-based food, right? Because there are the essentials that just everybody needs to have, like cumin and coriander and paprika and all those things, but I didn't include them in this video. But if you're interested in having even more parts to my seasoning essentials series, we can turn it into a series. And so, yeah, just let me know in the comments if you want to see even more about how to flavor your food well. Okay, so here we go with our next round. Make sure everything's in the shot. And we've got some really specialty ingredients in this round right here. I'm excited to share with you. So let's see. I will make sure everything's facing so you can read it clearly. Okay. Okay. All right, I think we're good to go. All right, so now we're getting into even more specialty realm, right? So I feel like a lot of the spices and seasonings that I just showed you in the last batch were things you can find at almost any grocery store, but some of these things I have to go to special stores to find or order them online. So first things first, this is a big old jar of, it's called kala namak. Please, if you know the correct pronunciation or I'm not doing it right, please correct me and let me know how to properly pronounce that. But I'm going to call it kala namak, and it's an Indian black salt. And so it's called black salt because it's been cured with like sulfur. Well, actually, there's a description here. Oh no, it doesn't describe it though. It just tells you how to use it. But yeah, this is it has a sulfuric flavor, which is similar to eggs. And so I use black salt quite a bit when I'm making vegan egg replacements. Like if I'm making a chickpea omelet, using chickpea flour, I'll add about a half teaspoon of this into that. Or if I'm making tofu scramble, if I'm making some mung bean frittatas, like anything that's eggy or egg based, and I'm trying to get a little bit of that flavor, I add this in. Now it is salt, so you can't use too much anyway, and it's also mild. You don't want it to be like overpowering because otherwise it tastes like spoiled eggs if you use too much. You don't want that flavor to be overpowering, but it adds a really nice note to anything you're flavoring with this black salt. So this was one of my later additions to my pantry, but once I had it, I couldn't go without it. So initially I used to go to local Indian groceries in my town, and they sold it in like relatively small bags for like $3 or $4. And honestly, they would last me a couple months because, I probably eat like vegan egg inspired dishes, maybe a couple times a month. If I'm like in the mood a lot, maybe a couple times a week. So usually a little bag would last me a few months. But I had upped the amount of recipes that I was testing in that genre of cooking. And so I just bought this big one. I think it's a pound. Oh, this is 4 pounds. I got this 4-pound jug of black salt from Amazon for like $20. So I think it was a good investment, and I don't have to buy it for probably years at this point. You don't want to let it sit too long, but I make sure it's tied up really tight so no air is getting in, so the flavor stays fresh. But let me tell you about some maybe a little bit more experimental things that I've done with black salt. Recently, I was testing a vegan cheesecake recipe, and I used a little bit of black salt in it. I've also made French toast and added a little bit of black salt to it. And then I have also made vegan eggnog and just added like a 1/4 teaspoon, maybe 1/8 teaspoon of the black salt to it, just because these are recipes where there are commonly eggs involved. And so even if the flavor isn't at the foreground, it's kind of at the background. So I use it very sparingly. And I mean, all of those recipes have come out amazing. And I like to think it's because I take the time to add in little touches of different flavorings here and there to really, like I said, develop the flavors in a full-bodied way so they They satiate the tongue and they represent the dish that we're trying to create. Okay, so next up, we're getting into our sesame based seasonings or flavorings. And so I have sesame oil, just toasted sesame oil, and then I also have tahini. So, of the two, toasted sesame oil is definitely more nutty and fragrant. And then the tahini sauce, it does have some nuttiness to it, but I would call this more earthy. So, while I would say that this, when you use it, it punches your recipes up a little bit. Like, it's very pronounced. So you use sesame oil pretty sparingly because it's very, very strong in flavor and smell. With tahini, it kind of grounds your dishes because, like I said, it's earthy. So there are often times where I'm making a recipe and I will use both sesame oil and tahini in them just because I want different types of flavor from the sesame to be pronounced as I'm developing something. But I've done some delicious like tahini coated tempeh. And so you marinate the tempeh, and I made a sauce with tahini and barbecue sauce and mustard and liquid aminos and a bunch of different spices, and made this delicious thick marinade that I soaked the tahini in for a few hours and then baked off in the oven, and it comes out golden brown and delicious. So those delicious textures are there, and then we have those amazing flavors from our sesame notes from tahini, which is a paste, and sesame oil. Next up, I think that these are kind of like kitchen staples as well, but I like to use in particular broth concentrates over broth. I just feel like broth, I usually can only get one or two recipes out of it. And so the package is very like voluminous, large in size. And it also is just more wasteful to be buying larger packaging. So I like these broth concentrates because not only do they pack in a lot of flavor and, they last a lot longer, but a little bit goes a long way. So I have two kinds here. I just have a vegetable broth concentrate. This brand is Matriarch Foods. I got this from Thrive Market, and this is just a new one that I wanted to try out. And then we have the king of broth concentrates here. This is Better Than Bouillon. And Better Than Bouillon is amazing because they have vegan chicken bouillon, vegan beef bouillon, vegan mushroom bouillon. They even have vegan pork bouillon or this delicious vegan roasted garlic bouillon. But the seasoned vegetable base is just, it's amazing all on its own. And so there's all these delicious vegetables in it, but there's also yeast in here. And so the fermentation, I think that's a commonality with a lot of these ingredients, is there's a fermentation process that happens, and that really develops depth and roundness and fullness of flavor. So yes, I absolutely love this Better Than Bouillon. I use it like if I'm making a vegan meatloaf, I'll put some of this in there. If I am making soup, obviously it goes in. If I'm like sauteing some jackfruit or mushrooms to go in fajitas or to make vegan gyros or something like that, this is usually an ingredient that I am using in the mix. So Better Than Bouillon is my favorite bouillon concentrate. But if you have one that you love, let me know in the comments. Okay, so next up, we have some seasonings that I got from Trader Joe's, but I've been seeing these genre of seasoning more and more places in the last 4 years or so. And so in this hand, I have my ultimate umami seasoning, and this is an umami seasoning made with porcini mushroom powder. So porcini mushrooms have a lot of umami in them because they have those savory flavors and because they also are earthy, right? And so it really grounds things out. And like I said, I got this from Trader Joe's, but you can find something similar, online like Amazon, or you can also find them at Aldi, Walmart. I've seen lots of different stores and companies having their own version of this. And this is an excellent way to add savory, earthy flavors to things you're cooking with. Another thing, I think this is kind of almost falls in like the vegan bouillon genre, but this is vegan chickenless seasoning salt. So I was first introduced to this type of seasoned salt by a brand called Jada Brands, and they had what was it? Chicken salt. That's what they called it. But basically, it has that chicken flavor. To me, it tastes like chicken ramen powder or like even chicken noodle soup or something like that in one seasoning salt. So obviously, if I'm making any recipe that is like a vegan inspired dish by chicken, I'm using this in here. This is definitely going in the mix for sure, always. So like I made some, actually I made some jackfruit fruit and chickpea tenders, and I used this in it, and it just gave it that delicious chickeny flavor. So you don't really have to think about it. This is kind of like a one-stop shop. Obviously, you add other flavors just to make it seasoned well, but this gets you going in terms of just really having that savory base to push you forward in your cooking process. Okay. Now we are getting into a top tier vegan cooking ingredient that you see in anything cheesy, and that is nutritional yeast. Nutritional yeast has a toasty, nutty, cheesy flavor that you see people use when they're making vegan mac and cheese, vegan nacho cheese sauce, vegan Parmesan cheese. This stuff is everywhere, and it's basically yeast. So once again, that fermentation is essential, like we've seen in so many of these other ingredients, to develop these full-bodied, round flavors that we enjoy and that we need to make flavorful vegan meals, right? So nutritional yeast all day, every day. You can sprinkle it on anything. You just sprinkle it on top of your salad. It's a great source of B12. So yeah, nutritional yeast. If this fits into your dietary specifications, get some and watch it change how your food tastes. And I've talked about cheese, actually. I was about to put this down, but something came to mind. I talked about cheese, but this is also one of those ingredients that I added into my vegan cheesecake recipe that I was testing that came out absolutely amazing. I feel like this played a role in actually making it taste more like cheesecake, because oftentimes when I see vegan cheesecakes, it's essentially like tofu or cashew based, and then there's some, acid in there from citrus like lemon or lime, or maybe even like some apple cider vinegar. So it gets the tang and the creaminess, but that's not all there is to cheese. Cheese has an aged fermented taste. And so this gave just a touch of that fermented taste that made it taste more cheesecakey than any vegan cheesecake I've had before. And I didn't go crazy, I only used 2 teaspoons. But a little bit went a long way, and I think it really balanced those flavors out beautifully. So I'm going to continue tweaking that vegan cheesecake recipe. But if you want to see how I make my vegan cheesecake, let me know in the comments, and I will definitely be back to share that with you here. Okay. And then the last one in this roundup, it seems pretty simple, but it's lime juice. Now I have limes here, but it could be lemon juice or anything like that. Sometimes you just need a little bit of acid. Sometimes I find if I'm making something savory and I've added in, my liquid aminos and my garlic and my onion and my pepper and, my paprika and my cumin, it's really grounded. And sometimes you just need a touch of brightness to make everything balance out in the way where, once again, all those spots on your tongue are being hit, your taste buds are being really satisfied and satiated, so the meal tastes right. It doesn't feel flat. You know what I mean? And so citrus plays a huge role in that. Now, I'm not using a ton of citrus all the time. Sometimes I might just be using a squeeze of lime juice, a squeeze of lemon juice. Sometimes I'm using the juice of an entire half lemon or lime. It just depends on what's called for. But this has a lot more uses than you might think. So keep citrus on deck in your kitchen to elevate your cooking for sure. And another thing I want to say, I think I've talked a lot about like meaty things, and I've mentioned like vegan eggs and vegan egg alternatives, or even some desserts. But another thing that you will see use, especially a lot of these ingredients for, is making vegan dairy alternatives. So like things like yogurt, sour cream, cream cheese, ranch dressing. Nutritional yeast is essential to making your vegan ranch dressing just pop off and taste amazing, right? So there are so many things you can improvise and explore with and experiment with when you have these types of spices in your cabinet, and you're able to pull them out and just try to add a little bit of this, a little bit of that, to really bring your flavors to life. And then the last thing I want to share is just a single item. And this item is really essential for bringing your vegan seafood dishes to life. These are kelp sheets, or nori. This is nori. So it's seaweed. So I've used vegan dulse flakes. I've used nori. I've used kelp to make things like vegan crab cakes. And I've made vegan crab cakes with chickpeas or hearts of palm, jackfruit, all those different things. But this goes a long way in bringing the seafood flavor to life in anything. Now, once again, it's a strong flavor and smell. And honestly, when you really think about seafood, They always say if you're eating seafood and it smells fishy, it's not fresh anymore. So you don't need to use a ton of this. And usually, if you're making vegan seafood tissue, whoa, if you're making vegan seafood dishes and you don't like the taste of this, then skip it. But kelp and the seaweeds, they all have lots of nutritional benefits. They have lots of minerals in them, so they are enriching your food on a nutritional level, but they're also enriching it from a flavor perspective. So this is something that you use sparingly, but it definitely packs a big punch and can transform a slab of tofu into a slab of vegan fish. You know what I'm saying? With this and a few other seasonings. So that is the beautiful thing about a lot of these other ingredients that I've shared today. Like, for example, the liquid aminos and the nutritional yeast. Okay, these have nutritional benefits as well. Oftentimes, when we're thinking about food, we're talking about how to eat healthy food, but oftentimes there are ways that the spices and the flavorings and the seasonings that you add to your food actually enhance the nutritional value of them. So think about that too. Eating simply is great. Follow what you need, follow what you're craving, but also try to diversify your palate. Try to diversify the ingredients that you're cooking with, because all that diversity means diversity of nutrients that you're taking in, which helps your body to function more optimally, given you don't have any food sensitivities or anything like that. So, this was a fun chat. I'm glad I did this. I'm back on YouTube. And if you don't want to miss out on any new videos from me, I'm planning to come back to YouTube with weekly videos. And so I'll be, creating a schedule, scheduling videos and things like that. I'll be doing lives. I'll be doing some more like pre-recorded videos, like what I ate in a week or meal prep videos, things like that. But I just wanted to hop back on here and go live today so y'all could see what I've been up to, and also to invite you to check out my page on Kitch. You can see another live cooking demo from me on Monday. I'm going to be making Ghanaian red, which is a black eyed pea dish with some roasted plantains and some sauteed collard greens and okra. So I've been cooking up really delicious food on Kitch as well. But yeah, I'm excited to like break out and try new stuff and be more experimental here on YouTube as well. So like I said, if you enjoyed this video, give it a like, subscribe to this channel, and I look forward to seeing you again very, very soon. Thanks for hanging out with me. Bye, everybody.